Hello, I'm Michael Tressler and I'm a Senior Customer Engineer at Microsoft. Welcome to Module 4 of our Teams Rooms Foundations training, Deploying Microsoft Teams Rooms. In this module, you'll learn how to standardize your deployments. You'll also learn how all of the different modules and components in Teams Rooms work together to form a cohesive system. And finally, you'll learn about resource accounts and how to configure them and various options for resource accounts. The goal of a standard deployment is to make sure that you can have a simple and repeatable rollout, not only at one office or in one office space, but in many locations across your geography, be that within a city, a country, or globally. You'll want to try to standardize on procurement and have the same options in as many rooms as possible. You'll have to decide on shipping. Will you ship all the devices to a central location, configure them there, and then ship them out to the remote locations for installation? Or will you drop ship everything directly to the final location and then do all of the configuration on site? The more consistent you can be with these practices, the better you will be in supporting and implementing and operating Teams Rooms in the future, and you'll be able to scale up from setting up Teams Rooms in just one building to setting it up globally. Here you have a high-level project plan, highlighting all of the key milestones in a Teams Rooms deployment. And at the bottom you have the three major teams that will be used to do an implementation. Facilities to help with room inventory, hanging, drilling, powering displays, and sealing microphones, as well as putting up signage. The AV team can be used to plan, configure, install, and support the actual Teams Rooms. And the overall IT project team will help with network readiness, provisioning and configuring of resource accounts, and monitoring, maintaining, and operating the Teams Rooms environment. You may also have system integrators that assist with some or all of these roles. So you'll want to set standards based on the size of a room where possible. So for small rooms, you'll use certain technologies. For large rooms, you'll use certain technologies. For classrooms or multi-purpose rooms, you'll use different configurations. Microsoft provides our own meeting room archetype specifications for different sized meeting rooms. I'll show you how that looks like by browsing to aka.ms/teamsrooms, which will take us to a website highlighting all of our various Teams Rooms devices. I'm on the Microsoft web page, which highlights the various room systems. If I scroll down, I can click on Space and select one of the spaces. I'll go with Mid-Sized Meeting Room. When I select that, it applies a filter and shows only the mid-sized meeting rooms. We can see up here the filters we have for our current search. I can pick one of these devices and drill in and see what recommendations Microsoft has for the deployment of these rooms. As I scroll down, I can see microphone guidance for the room. I can see speaker guidance for the room, as well as camera, and be able to see the field of view and make sure this is the right camera for the room I'm working on. There's also a cable management diagram, which shows a high-level view of how the cables will be connected. We'll spend a little more time later in this module discussing how to connect various Teams Rooms components. When working on a standardized deployment, be sure to use as few distributors as possible and centralize as much as you can. Again, ship to a central location if needed to help configure the devices in one location or a few locations where you have Teams Rooms experts, and then ship it out to remote offices where people may not be as well versed in Teams Rooms. Plan for product delays. Things can always happen. Things very unexpected can happen, like a pandemic, which puts a slowdown on shipping and delivery schedules. Make sure you standardize your deployment. Try to create all of the resource accounts as standardized as possible. Have step-by-step instructions created for how you intend all of the rooms to be configured and installed. Make sure you have standards for how you're going to run and organize the cables and where you're going to mount devices. If you're going to mount compute devices behind displays, try to make that a standard. If you'd prefer to put compute displays in a locked cabinet in the room, make that a standard. Be sure you have a good understanding of the device setup instructions and any necessary configuration files. Know what basic troubleshooting steps you can take before escalating. And by the way, Microsoft Teams is a great place to store all of the information for each of your Teams rooms. Also, don't forget about training and enablement. It doesn't matter how great the Teams Rooms implementation is and how wonderful you did your job. If end users are not familiar with how to use the system, they probably won't, and you won't receive a lot of reward for all of your effort. IT training, such as these Teams Rooms training modules, are also effective in helping you implement and support Teams Rooms. There are additional resources for training and enablement, and those are discussed in Module 8 of this training. Where possible, create a cabling diagram. Here's an example of one such thing. The idea is that you may not have Teams Rooms experts in every one of your offices or locations. By having a diagram that you can send to them, the local IT staff may have issues with Teams Rooms. Your ability to send them a clear, detailed diagram will greatly expedite their ability to support and troubleshoot Teams Rooms. So how does Teams Rooms connect? Here's an example of a small Microsoft Teams Rooms configuration. We start with the compute module, which is the heart of Teams Rooms. Everything will eventually connect to the compute. The middle of table console connects to the compute module via USB. And this console is what people will be interacting with. Microphone, audio, and camera are all contained in one unit in this sample, and that connects via USB to the compute module. There's a monitor or a display of some sort that is already in the room or was just recently added, and that will connect via HDMI to the compute module. You may also enable USB touchscreen for the monitor. So here is a simple configuration showing that it's a pretty straightforward connectivity to bring Teams Rooms up and have complete audio, video, and even touchscreen displays for inking. Let's look at a more complex configuration. Once again, we start with the compute module, which is the heart of the Teams Room system. There's the center of table console, which still connects via USB to that compute module. Now we add things like display extensions. So these are the kind of devices that will extend cabling beyond the standard. We have a separate camera, which in this case connects to the display extension and not directly to the compute module. There are multiple speakers that could be added to the room, and in this case, they extend to the display extension. Note that it's using an analog cable, so we are now seeing the first cable that is different than USB or HDMI. There are things like a table extension, which would connect devices such as microphones. So the microphones can connect to the table extension via USB. The table extension connects to the display extension via Category 6 cabling. In this larger room, we'll have dual monitor. Both of those monitors connect to compute with HDMI, so that would be 2 HDMI cables. And then one of those monitors would be enabled for USB touchscreen as well. We can share a laptop screen directly into a meeting via an HDMI cable that's connected to the console. And why not? Let's add a content camera as well. And the content camera will connect to the compute module also with USB. As you can see, this is a much more complex configuration. Because of the ability to support these types of large, complex configurations, Teams Rooms can scale to the largest rooms that you have to maintain. There's some additional things to consider. Many cables can be extended for long-haul runs. As we saw in the previous slide, some of the vendors have their own solutions to address this. That's what those extensions were, the display extension, the table extension. Your display should support HDMI CEC or PC mode to automatically switch on the screen from standby. You may need to install CEC injectors in order to convert the wake signal coming from Teams Rooms to the displays. The displays can be 4K monitors, but note that Teams Rooms only sends a 1920 by 1080 signal to the screens. Only wired network connectivity is supported. We do not support Wi-Fi for Teams Rooms. And only DHCP is supported for assigning the initial IP address. However, once the system is up and running, you can sign in as admin and enable a static IP address. Many of the devices can be locked or secured to help prevent theft or other actions taken against the devices. In this picture on the right, we see an arrow pointing to a locking mechanism to secure the display to the wall. Be sure to securely mount devices and use the security offerings given by the vendors. One other thing I'd like to point out in this picture is right here, this rolled up piece of paper is the room diagram. So not only could the NIT staff member go to Microsoft Teams and look at an online version of the diagram, they could simply walk into the room, look behind the monitor, and see the diagram of how that Teams Rooms is laid out. Always use the correct cables and always update the firmware. Vendors design the systems with specific cables in mind. As we saw in the large meeting room slide, one of the connections was using Category 6 cable. If the vendor wants you to use Category 6 cable, be sure you're using Category 6 cable and not Category 5 cable. Using the exact vendor recommended cable will make sure you'll have a positive experience with Teams Rooms. Also, use quality cables. The HDMI cable that connects the console to the laptop in order to share the laptop screen into a meeting should be a high-quality HDMI cable. Most inexpensive HDMI cables were not designed to be plugged and unplugged from a laptop several times a day, and over the course of a year will fall apart. Using a quality cable will ensure that the cable will last much longer, and users will not walk into a meeting room outfitted with Teams Rooms and run into an issue where they can't share from their laptop into a meeting because the cable is tired and worn down. You also want to always update your firmware. Updated firmware will make sure that hardware is running optimally. Further, vendors will often add new features via firmware. For example, one of the cameras I have worked with shipped with an original firmware. When I received it, I updated the firmware, and that enabled the feature to have it dynamically zoom to the active speaker. The Microsoft Teams Rooms resource account. We're going to spend the rest of the module focusing on the resource account. What is the resource account? Well, it's technically a Microsoft Exchange mailbox, and specifically it's a Microsoft Exchange resource. When people schedule a room, it is this mailbox or resource that they invite to their meeting. And this mailbox will, on behalf of the room, accept or decline the meeting invite. This resource account is also the account that signs into the Microsoft Teams Rooms app. So when users walk into a room and click the Join button, Teams Rooms knows to show a specific meeting because it is the mailbox that is signed into Teams Rooms. This account must be enabled for Skype or Microsoft Teams, and that's Skype on premises or Skype online. And try to establish a naming convention, particularly when you move to Azure Active Directory and the concept of dynamic groups. When you add a new resource account, it could automatically be added to a group. And then that group, in part, could be assigned certain policies via Intune. So just by naming the account consistently, you can create a rule. It will automate a lot of the configuration for you. We strongly recommend using the Teams Room Standard or Premium license for all meeting rooms that will be used for Skype for Business Online or Microsoft Teams. The Teams Room Standard license is a cost-effective license that includes all the core components needed for Teams Rooms. The Teams Rooms Premium license adds additional features such as a Microsoft managed service that will help with everything from planning your rooms to monitoring and troubleshooting Teams Rooms. This license also includes everything in the standard license. If you are Skype for Business on premises, you will need to assign an Enterprise Client Access license, and if you intend to use enterprise voice features of Skype for Business, you'll need a Plus Client Access license. Dial into a Microsoft Teams meeting and Call Me At features are included in the audio conferencing license. Dial into Microsoft Teams meetings as if someone is remote or driving and they want to join with a mobile phone. They would then dial the phone number and be able to join the meeting. For Teams Rooms connected to Microsoft Teams, if you'd like to make and receive any phone call outside of an audio conference, you'll either need to assign a calling plan license or configure direct routing. If you're configuring direct routing, No additional licenses are needed as the phone system license is already included with a Teams Room standard or premium license. Every Teams Rooms device requires its own unique account. You cannot share a resource account across multiple rooms. If you do, only one of those devices will be able to join a meeting, and other rooms devices with the same account will not be able to join any meetings at the same time. It is recommended to create the account well in advance of hardware installation. This is because you may need to open up tickets within your internal IT structure to have these accounts created, and then you need to test and review to make sure the accounts were set up correctly as per your requirements. You can create resource accounts via several ways, including Microsoft 365 Admin Center, PowerShell, or for on-premises cases, Active Directory users and computers. You may also need to edit the account to enable it for Skype for Business using Skype for Business Control Panel or PowerShell. And again, consider naming standards for this account to simplify future management. How is this resource account secured? There are several ways in which security applies to these accounts. Modern authentication is one. If your environment is configured to use modern authentication, it is recommended you enable modern authentication for the resource account. You can use Intune conditional access policies to help control and limit what the resource account has access to. For example, it can only sign in on a given subnet. If the device is moved to a different subnet, the resource account will not be allowed to sign in. All credentials are secured on the device through a physical TPM chip and are stored in the Windows Vault. Physical TPM chips are required on all compute modules used by Teams Rooms. So in order for a Teams Rooms to be certified, there must be a physical TPM chip. And the Windows Vault then uses this unique key in order to encrypt the username and password of the resource account. There are optional calendar processing settings you can use to limit the amount of data stored in the mailbox of the resource account. We'll spend a little more time later on these options. So what is the flow for creating a resource account? Well, first you need to identify what room are you going to use with Teams Rooms. Now, does a resource already exist? It's very possible there is already a resource account for this room well before you decided to put Teams Rooms in. If that is the case, we can then move forward with configuring auto accept. If there is not an existing resource, we'll create a new Exchange resource and then configure calendar auto accept. Once we've set the auto accept parameters for the Exchange mailbox, we'll set the password to not expire. Resource accounts must have their password set to not expire. Otherwise, after, let's say, 90 days, the account will not be able to sign into Teams Rooms. And in that scenario, no one will be able to join meetings in that room until someone physically changes the password on the Teams Rooms application. In order to avoid this scenario, we set the password to not expire. The next question is, will you enable this account for Skype for Business, be it on-premises or online? If yes, go ahead and enable the account for Skype. If not, assign a Teams license. If you have enabled the account for Skype, your next decision point is, will you enable it for Teams as well as for Skype? If so, assign a Teams license. You're now done and you can move on to configure the Teams Rooms application. So here's a walkthrough of how to create the account using the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. First, you sign into https://admin.microsoft.com and then navigate to the resources option and then underneath there, rooms and equipment. Once you're there, you can see all of the rooms that have already been created. Click the plus add button on the left-hand side to add a new resource account. You can now fill in the values, make sure the type is room, give it a friendly display name, and here's where the naming standard really comes into play, because it is this value you will use for any dynamic groups. You can optionally fill out capacity, location, and phone number. Note that this is not the phone number that is actually assigned to the resource account. This is just a field in Active Directory. In order to assign the phone number, you will either need to do that in Skype for Business on premises or online, or using Teams Admin Center or PowerShell. You'll then be asked to assign a license. In this example, we've assigned the meeting room license. We see we have 21 of 25 licenses available, so we can easily assign a license to this room. After you click Add, it'll take about a minute or two, and then you will see this screen. This is giving you confirmation that the room mailbox is ready to use and was created successfully. In this presentation, we're going to go ahead and click on Set Scheduling Options, though we probably wouldn't do this after we create every account, but we want to see what the default scheduling options are. By default, Teams Rooms will join repeating meetings, which means, a meeting that happens every Tuesday at 2 p.m. for the next 6 months, it will join that. We will allow scheduling at any time of the day, so from 8 a.m. or 2 a.m. or 11 p.m. at any time anyone wants to schedule a meeting, they can. And then we're going to set some limits on the meetings that we will accept. The meeting invite has to be within the next 6 months. So if you're trying to reserve the room 9 months from now, by default, that is not allowed. And the meeting length cannot be longer than 24 hours. You can either change these values here right now, or you can go to Exchange Admin Center after the fact and make changes there. And by default, this absolutely should be on in almost every case. Auto accept meeting requests is enabled by default. The only time you would disable this is if you have a secure or a restricted meeting room and you want to have a human intervene to manually accept meeting requests so that people don't accidentally use a room they're not authorized to use. We now need to set the password. So we navigate to Users and then Active Users in Microsoft 365 Admin Center, find the user and click the key icon. We want to make sure that this is unchecked. The Teams Rooms app does not have an interface to type in a new password when requested. As such, the password must be entered here and then reset clicked. So Teams Rooms does not support changing the password after first sign in. Now let me show you a demonstration of going through this again. Now let's create a new resource account for our Teams Rooms. So we'll go to admin.microsoft.com and sign in with an admin account. And throw on a password. And stay signed in. Not that that matters much in this scenario, but one less sign in. So by default, we don't get to see the resources tab. None of these are resource. We'll have to click show all. And then the resources option pops up. From here, we pick rooms and equipment. And we will then add a resource mailbox. We already have a few created here. And we're going to create a new one. So the name we're going to give it is Conf Room Washington. Email is automatically populated, so we'll keep it that way. Capacity, this stuff is technically optional. It does show up in Outlook when you're looking for a room, but that's it. Location will leave blank, phone number will leave blank, and then we'll assign one of our meeting room licenses to this device and click Add. So now we wait for a few minutes and I'll come back when the room has been created. Okay, the room has been successfully created, so let's look at a few things. Let's look at the scheduling options. These are the default values that get assigned to a room. So we can see we allow repeating meetings or recurring appointments. We can schedule the room any time of day, so there is an option you can set when you sign in as the resource account into Outlook Web. You can then set hours, work hours. So this option says don't limit it to the work hours that are defined for this room. Automatically decline meetings outside of the limits below, so we don't want to accept meetings that are going to last longer than 6 months or that are scheduled 6 months in advance, which is 180 days. And the maximum length that a meeting can be is 24 hours. Critically, though, the auto accept meeting request is set to on. You'll want that always to be on. You don't want to change that. From here now, it'll refresh our list and we can see that our new room has been added. Now, the one thing that we do need to do is set a password for this so that we can sign in to the account. Right now, it basically has no password, or it has a password. We don't know what it is. So we'll go to Users, Active Users, and find our conference room Washington. So here it is. And so I can quickly just click the key for password reset, and let me create the password. It's something I know. And I'm going to uncheck this box. There's no way to go to force a password change interactively within the Teams Rooms app. So we can't force password changes and then ask the person to reset it once they've signed in. So we'll now reset the password and close. So now we have created a resource account and assigned the password and assigned a license. You can also use PowerShell to configure these accounts. PowerShell can be faster if you create a script, and PowerShell can also be used to bulk create accounts. So if you need to create 50 or 100 accounts, you can create a PowerShell script to help out. There are two mandatory PowerShell modules that are required. One is MS Online, which is the Azure Active Directory PowerShell module, and the Exchange Online PowerShell module, which is for Exchange. If you're using Skype for Business Online, you'll need to download and install the Skype for Business Online PowerShell module. First thing we're going to do is make sure we have enough licenses by running the get MSOL account SKU command. This will return all of our licenses, and we can see that in the meeting room here we have 25 available licenses, and we've used 5 of them, meaning we have 20 licenses available to assign to our resource accounts. When creating PowerShell, we recommend using scripts and variables. Variables will make it easier in the future to make changes, as you only need to change the value in one place. And as that value is used multiple times throughout the script, that change gets reflected automatically. In this case, we're going to create a few variables like account VPN, the mailbox name, mailbox alias, our password. Note that this password is in clear text, so you may not want to set password via PowerShell, or after you set it to this plain text password, you may want to go into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center and change it there so that this clear text password can't be used by anyone else. Here we have our license with our full name and then the location of our tenant. So to connect to Office 365, we grab our user credentials and then simply connect MSOL service and connect Exchange Online, passing in our credentials. And now we're going to create a mailbox. As I mentioned earlier, the resource account is really an Exchange mailbox. So here's the command, and you can see our variables throughout this command: display name and mailbox alias and account UPN. And here is our password as plain text. So be careful when using scripts to change the password right away. The next thing we're going to do is enable calendar processing. So we can look over here and say automate processing is auto accept, so automatically accept any meeting invite. Add organizer to subject is false. So that means when the meeting is shown on the console, the center of table console, will it just say meeting name, or will it say the meeting name organizer and meeting name? So for example, Megan Bowen weekly status meeting, or will it just say weekly status meeting? Delete comments. This means it will not delete the body of the email. It'll keep it in the Exchange mailbox. And same with delete subject. You can choose to delete subject, and then the meetings on the Teams rooms will just be called Megan Bowen, and it will not say Megan Bowen weekly status report. This is a security thing, so that if someone walks through a restricted area of the building and they look at the Teams Rooms interface and they see a meeting called something like meeting about acquisition of company X, that might lead to some information that the regular employee shouldn't know about. So in that case, it would just say Megan Bowen's meeting, and you would have no idea what the meeting is about. And then if the meeting is flagged as private, we're going to keep that flag set as private. We're not going to remove the private property. So by going through a lot of these things, these are the recommended defaults, but for secure rooms or restricted rooms, you can certainly change these to help obfuscate some things. Next, we're going to set the password to never expire and then assign the license. So if you do want to do this in bulk, you can see an example. Here would be a CSV file at the top with a clear text password that's, change this password, and a couple of other parameters. And here we can see all of our variables are used, the same ones we pointed out earlier. We can use those variables and then start automating and creating a script to bulk create multiple accounts. Skype for Business support. So in Skype for Business, you basically have two options. You can just take a typical Skype for Business user account, leave it as is, give it a name such as the conference room name, and then configure the Exchange settings and off you go. Or optionally, you can convert that user account to a meeting room account. It's essentially the same thing, but there are about 2 or 3 unique things to it. One is Teams Rooms always joins via lobby. So when you click the one-touch join, you're entered into the lobby and the Teams Rooms will have to add you in. That's a security feature that's added. And because we know a meeting room has been invited to a meeting, you'll be then asked if you want to mute your device before joining the meeting in order to limit echo and feedback. One other thing to be aware of is when you convert a user to a meeting room, that meeting room will no longer appear when you run get-cs user as a Skype for Business PowerShell command. You'll have to run get-cs meeting room instead to list your meeting rooms. So for Skype for Business, how do we do that? We create an Exchange resource mailbox, and then just similar to the way we've done already, and then we run enable CS user, where we're going to have to know the name of our Skype pool. You could also do this through Skype for Business control panel. And then here's the command that we've decided we want to convert this to a meeting room from a user. So we're going to enable CS meeting room. Here's the identity. Here's the registrar pool. And this is now converted to a Skype for Business meeting room. In order to enable a meeting room setting for online, you would have to run get-cs online user to find the pool that the online user is assigned to, and then enable CS meeting room, and then whatever pool name was returned from the Microsoft 365 service, you would add that here. So let me go ahead and show a demo of creating these accounts via PowerShell. Now let's create a resource account using PowerShell. There are 3 required PowerShell modules that need to be installed. That's the Microsoft Exchange Online PowerShell module, the MSOL, also known as Microsoft Online or the Azure Active Directory PowerShell module, and optionally the Skype for Business Online PowerShell module. I've already got those installed, and I'll leave notes down below the video for you to get instructions on how to install those modules. So first thing we're going to do is capture the credentials of the account I'm using to sign in to Office 365 into a variable called $cred. Now if you're using multi-factor authentication, I don't think this method works, and I'll show you how to work around that on this next command. So now that it's captured the credentials, we're going to connect to Exchange Online. If you have multi-factor, remove this part and you actually don't even need to run this first command. You would just start your new PowerShell session and type connect to Exchange Online. So since it already has my credentials, it'll just go to connect to Exchange Online and bring everything up. And this will take a moment for it to go through its process. Now that we're connected to Exchange Online, we can start doing things such as defining the mailbox we're going to create. So we just created a variable here called TRMBX, Teams Rooms Mailbox, and we're going to call it CF Bonanza at this tenant. So now we're going to create the actual new mailbox. This is a PowerShell command I'm using, new-mailbox, and Microsoft Online Services ID, TRMBX. So this is telling Exchange that we're going to create an online account with the username that we have, creating an alias, and then we create a display name that's easier to read. We're letting Exchange know that this is a room and to enable the account. And then we're going to set the password, which here is in clear text. So you can see right here, the password is labpass@word42. After you create the mailbox, go into the admin center and change the password. So this will take a moment for the mailbox to be created. And there we go. We've got a created mailbox. Now we need to set some parameters on this mailbox. And that's done in this case by using the set calendar processing command. And we're going to do it against our newly created mailbox. There's that TRMBX. Automate processing. And this is the key one here. We're going to auto accept any meeting invites. So whenever somebody sends a meeting invite to this room, go ahead and automatically accept it. Now this also could be auto reject if the meeting room is already booked at the time. So if somebody already booked the room and then 5 minutes later someone tries to book again, it'll reject it. There are a couple other parameters in here that we've set. Nothing too exciting there. Go ahead and look up set calendar processing on docs.microsoft.com to see exactly what these stand for, as well as a few other options. But we're going to add an additional response called "This room is enabled for Teams meetings. Please be sure to schedule using Microsoft Teams." It's a little note that pops up when you schedule a meeting and invite the room. So it reminds the users that, hey, this room has Teams, is enabled for Teams meetings. It has a Teams room system installed. So we've got the Exchange Online area done. Now we need to connect to Microsoft Online Service, and we're going to pass a credential $CRED that we set up as the very first command in this session. Again, if you're using multi-factor authentication, don't use that -credential, and then it'll pop up a form for you to sign into. The first command we're going to run, and then these commands we have to use MSOL Service because they're going against Azure and not against Exchange. So we're going to set the account so that the password never expires. And then we're going to have to assign a license. So I'm going to run some commands here. We're going to try to get the licenses, any license that has meeting room in it. So we're going to assign a meeting room license to this account. So let's take a look real quick and see what that variable MSOL license SKU, what it got back. So let's take a look, and it looks like it got one meeting room license, so it found the meeting room license that we have. Now we're going to set the country code for the user account. This is important for licensing to make sure the licenses match in the right geographic region. And we're going to get the country code automatically based off tenant information. So this get MSOL company information will automatically grab information about the company, and one of those values is the country code letter here. So we'll get that value and then automatically apply it with set MSOL user. And now finally we're going to install or assign that meeting room license to the user. So add license $MSOL license SKU, which we assigned up here to that variable. Next, and optionally, we're going to connect to Skype for Business Online. You don't have to do this, but there are a few compelling reasons to do this. One is if your device is ever going to join a Skype meeting, you're going to need to go ahead and do this. It also enables the ability to join meetings via URI, often done with Cloud Video Interop. Companies will give you a URI and you'll have to connect to them using that. And that's done using the Skype for Business Online engine. Now we're going to run the command get CS Online user to see if that account has been created yet in Skype for Business Online, and it has not. We're now just going to have to wait until that happens. All right, I've waited a few minutes, so let's see if this is good to go. We see that we get data back, but it doesn't mean that the account is ready yet for Skype for Business. We need to scroll up a little here and find something called registrar pool and make sure we have a value in there. So where is registrar pool hiding? Here it is. And we can see that there's no value here. So the account has not been assigned yet to a Skype for Business Online pool. So we're going to have to wait a little longer until we have a value there for registrar pool. And it's been about an hour and the account has been created. And we can run the GetCS Online user account to make sure we have a value in the registrar pool field. So if I scroll up here and look for it, here we go. We have a value in registrar pool. So now we can run enable CS meeting room, which will enable this as a conference room in Skype for Business. So here, this command automatically pulls the registrar pool for us, so we don't have to type anything in. So at this point, we're now enabled for Skype for Business, we're enabled for Microsoft Teams, and we are ready to set up our Teams Rooms device. There's some advanced options you can set for these resource accounts. To do that, open Exchange Admin Center in Microsoft 365. Click on Recipients and then Resources, and then select the room to edit. So in this case, we're going to edit Huddle Room. Once inside there, we can add things like a mail tip. So by adding the mail tip in the upper right, we can then see down here that when somebody enters this conference room name, a little tip pops up saying this room is equipped to support Teams and Skype meetings. So that's what the mail tip does. Not required, but a nice touch to add. Additional responses. So when the resource account, the Exchange mailbox, auto accepts a meeting, it'll send an email back saying, hey, I've accepted the meeting. Now it's a little dry, that response. It's very utilitarian. Just basically says I've accepted the meeting invite. We can jazz it up quite a bit. So by using HTML here in this booking option down here, this additional response, we can now add a graphic. We can add a link to a short video. We can tell people this room is equipped with one-touch join. Did you make it a Teams or Skype for Business meeting? And things like that. So we can make it much more interactive. We can have end-user training links. We can, have corporate logos and other things in this response. By using additional responses, we can have a much more interesting email response to the meeting organizer. Here's how you can set these values via PowerShell. Here's a new one first, process external meeting messages, $true. What this value does, it allows Teams Rooms to accept a meeting invite from an external domain. So by default, if we are Contoso.com, our Teams Rooms resource accounts will not accept a meeting invite from nwtraders.com. However, if we enable process external meeting messages, that resource account will now accept meeting invites from external domains. Here's how to set the mail tip via PowerShell, and then the add additional response true, and then the actual additional response. This isn't a variable because otherwise you would potentially see pages and pages of HTML formatting that reply. It's usually easier in PowerShell to take a bunch of HTML, apply it to a variable, and then use that variable when setting this property. So here are the security-related changes. A couple of key things that we haven't gotten to yet is delete non-calendar items. So any emails, even if they're not calendar invites, any emails forwarded to that mailbox, they should be deleted. Here we're going to delete subject and delete comments, $true. So the whole point of this is in a meeting invite, there may be an agenda and other information that is very sensitive. So by setting these values, the mailbox will immediately delete all of that information and not keep it. This prevents Exchange administrators from signing in to that resource account or viewing the mailbox of that resource account, or even Teams Rooms administrators from signing into these resource accounts and seeing information they're not supposed to see just by reading the meeting invites. Again, we gave an example of a meeting that might be discussing an acquisition of company X. A Teams Rooms administrator could sign into Outlook as the resource account and see that information. By setting these values, it removes all of that. So a display name makes things much more readable. So if we did set a display, we do set display names in our examples, but if for some reason you don't have one, this will be the default name shown, and that is not very legible to your users. Conference Room STP Avanti 15 is a little more readable by the users. So there's plenty of ways you can see and even change display names. Via PowerShell, there's get Azure AD user, get CS Online user, get mailbox, the O365 Admin Center in Rooms and Equipment, and in the Active Users tab, Exchange Online, Teams Admin Center, plenty of places that show display name, and in many of those places you can edit the display name. In our example, we're just going to go to Microsoft 365 Admin Center. We're going to expand users and then active users. This is the same place we went to change the password. We're going to find the conference room, click on the room name, edit the display name field, and right here we can then see the change we're going to enter. Here's an example of setting it via the Azure AD PowerShell module using set-msol user. Room lists are a great feature. So instead of just having a flat list of a couple hundred or a couple thousand meeting rooms, you can organize them by location. And that location can be a building, a campus, a city, or even a country. It's up to you to decide how you would like to organize all this. So here in this example, we have a room list created. And if we click on Tampa Bay, it then filters and shows the 3 meeting rooms available in St. Petersburg, which is a city in the Tampa Bay area. How do we create room lists? These have to be done via PowerShell. But it's pretty simple. You just type new distribution group, give it a name. So this can be anything you want it to be. And then make sure you flag it as a special distribution group called a room list. And then to add members to that list, we add a distribution group member. And then to which distribution group? The Tampa Bay one we just created. And then the name of the room we want to add. So here we add MTR STP Avante 1. And here we add MTR STP Avante 2. So that way we can now see 2 rooms inside the Tampa Bay room list. A little more advanced is places. Instead of just naming the location of where rooms are, we can talk about features that the rooms have. So there's additional criteria, like is it wheelchair accessible? What kind of hardware is in the room? Is it a single display or dual display? What floor is it on in a given building? We can filter by building name and even assign tags. So here's an example where we have Tampa Bay list. We're filtering on Tampa Bay, and we can see there are 3 rooms that are available. So now we're going to click the filter pull down, and we're going to filter on rooms that have at least a capacity for 10 people and that have a video camera and wheelchair accessible. And when we click the apply button, it brings back 1 room. And we can see this 12 here is a 12-person room. There are those 3 optional fields. One was for capacity, one was for phone number. So this is where the capacity value shows up. How do we create places? Again, it must be done via PowerShell. So we use the set place commandlet. This is the name of our conference room or our resource account. And then we say if it's wheelchair accessible, the capacity of the room, and the display device name true. Just basically saying yes or no, we have a display name. Now you could get a little crazy because this is actually a text field that you can do anything you want to. So we could say this room has single monitor or dual monitor, and then we could later run get mailbox, apply a filter where the get place is dual monitor, and then we could list as IT admins all of our dual monitor rooms. This wouldn't be seen by end users using Outlook. This is strictly for IT administrators. The end user would just see if they tick the box for I want to have a room that has a video camera, for example. It doesn't matter if it's $true or if it says high definition video or whatever. They will still be able to check that out. In Outlook on the web today, you can also book multiple rooms. So you can pick 2 different rooms, which is nice if they're geographically separated. If you are setting up a conference, if you are setting up a large meeting for people in a conference room in one city to meet with people via Teams rooms and a conference room in another city, you can just go ahead and reserve both conference rooms via Outlook on the web today. So here's a demo of how to configure all of these advanced options. So distribution groups and places help your users find the conference room that they're looking for. So oftentimes they'll browse for a room and you'll just see this list and they'll have no idea which room does what and why certain rooms, why they should pick one room over another. So distribution groups are exchange-based and they will help put things into locations, and then places will help it become a little more accurate where you can filter on certain features of a given room. So I'll show how to create the distribution groups and places, and then we'll look at the user experience to see how this pops up. I've started off by connecting with Exchange Online, which is nothing too great. We should have seen that in previous videos. Now I'm going to create a variable, trmbx, and that creates the name, that has the name of the conference room we created in previous videos. So now I'm going to create a new distribution group, and this is the location of where these teams' rooms are located. So the Bellevue Building 1 conference rooms. And notice the room list parameter at the end, which lets Exchange know that this isn't exactly a traditional distribution group. The next thing to do is to add a member to this distribution group, and we do that with the add distribution group member commandlet. Once this finishes, there we go. That distribution group has been created. Now we're going to add the distribution group member to Bellevue Building 1, and this is going to be our Teams Rooms mailbox, which is defined up here to be CF Bonanza. So we'll add that in. And then just for fun, I'm going to add 2 more conference rooms in that have already been created. So we're going to add Adams and Rainier to this distribution group. So now I'm going to create places, and places give additional attributes to the rooms. So here's the first one I'm going to run. I'm going to set place for our mailbox, and then is wheelchair accessible $true. This lets people who have accessibility needs know that this room is good for them. We set a capacity, and then we say there is a display in the room. So here is the other conference room, Adams. I'm going to say this is not wheelchair accessible and has a capacity of only 6. So these will end up being values we can filter on in Outlook on the web. In this video, I'm going to show you how a user can invite Teams rooms to a meeting. So we'll do that using Outlook on the web because that one's got the most updated features for me to show. So in Outlook, I click down here on Calendar, and then I click on New Event. In here, I can add a title, so we'll call it Status Meeting. I can invite attendees, so we'll invite Megan. And we'll pick one of these auto-recommended free times, but here's the thing. Search for a room or location. First, let me make it a Teams meeting. Don't forget to do that. Now, search for a room or location. I can click on here. It gives some recommendations out of the gate, but I'm going to browse for more rooms. And now, this is where that distribution groups and places comes into play. So I can select a room list. There are many here, or I can type one in if I happen to go for a different location. So for example, in Amsterdam, I could pick this conference room. But for this example, we'll stay with these Tampa Bay area rooms. So these are the 3 rooms available in Tampa Bay. And if we look down here, it'll tell us that there are some things there. That capacity is 12. There are speakers, there's a display, there's things like that. So I can filter on capacity here. So if there were, say, 20, 30, 50 rooms. So let's say I want 10-person capacity, and immediately it's filtered it down to the 1 conference room that's available. If I reset that to 1. Now, I can pick any floor in this building, or just those on the 8th floor, or just those on the 9th floor. So here we see there's differences. You can filter on 8th floor or 9th floor. We'll go back to any. Then we can pick features. So let's say I need an accessible room on the 8th floor. That narrows it down to 2. And the capacity is, say, 8. And that gives me the room that best meets my criteria. And that's available. So this will also filter out if rooms are not available at this time between 11:30 and noon. So that's where the distribution groups and the places come in handy. One other thing in Outlook on the web is you can invite 2 conference rooms. So for example, if this were an international meeting and I did want to invite that room in Amsterdam, I can invite it as a second room. Now this feature is going to come to Outlook desktop. It's available right now for Outlook on the web. Same with this Places is only available today as I'm recording this in Outlook on the web, but it is scheduled to go to Outlook on the desktop. And now I send off my invitation and we're good to go. How do you assign a phone number to Teams rooms? Well, this is basically the same way as you would assign it to any user from Microsoft Teams. So you would go to the Teams Admin Center, go to the calling area, find the room, and assign a phone number. You can also do this via PowerShell, which is a little more complicated. You have to get a location ID, at least for the United States and Canada, and then set the voice user with a telephone number and a location. In Skype for Business, it's a little easier. You use the set CS user commandlet and then assign the telephone number you would like to assign to that user. In summary, we saw how to standardize our device ordering and how the various Teams Rooms components connect. We found out what a resource account is and how to create one, and then finally how to set some advanced options on resource accounts.